most important thing. All right. Excellent. So thanks everyone for joining us for our Q2 GDG Cloud Montreal meetup. This launch session will be around the GCP ML Engineer certification. So it's going to be an AMA, Ask Me Anything, around that. And our main speaker is going to be Carlos, who's there. At the same time, I'm just going to go through our little agenda. So a bit of intro, housekeeping, classic intro stuff, some news, and some also the bringing back the cool blog post. Just going through since the last session, cool post that was out there on GCP with nifty little tricks, or like I said, like it's like coffee machine talk, where eventually we'll be able to do again. Then we'll hit on the AMA piece. It's going to be a question and wrap up. So on the question for the AMA and question part, it's going to happen and be driven by Uda. And that's going to be in roughly 15 minutes. So we're going to start there. So that's our agenda for today. So this is a mixed. It's a mixed event, meaning it's Google Cloud, GDG Cloud Montreal, and Ottawa together. So welcome everyone, and this is our team for Montreal. Well, myself, Stacy Verano. There's Uda, who's there. She can maybe turn on her camera and say hi. There's also Lilia, who's there as an event organizer. Thank you. There's Tatiana, who's not with us at the moment. There's Archie, who's probably at the CNCF meetup because he's the CNCF ambassador. And there's Boris also from Stack Labs that shows up. In terms of the Ottawa group, there's Carlos, who's going to be doing our talk today. And there's also Jen, who's there also when possible. So this is the Ottawa chapter. Just going through the rest of our things.
And by the way, Stacey,
yes.
Just if I can pitch in, we are looking for organizers, GDG Cloud Ottawa. So please write to me. This is my mail in the chat in here. If you are interested in joining us, we look for help on Ottawa chapter as well.
Excellent. So yeah, you've put your information in the chat. So excellent. We'll make sure. So yeah, if anybody is interested in participating in the GDG Cloud Ottawa chapter, jump in. So a bit on what we do. Of course, we're covering everything that's Google Cloud, Google Open Source. There's a piece of Devs Fest when it happens. There's also study jams around like AI and ML. Those are all the topics and categories that we're covering within this event. So just moving on, if you want to follow us, there we have our good old Twitter feed that you can follow. But also we have, and that's brand new and fresh and shiny, we have our Slack channel. So basically in the GDG Montreal Slack, there is a public one called GDG Cloud Montreal Public. So feel free to join, and that way the community can exchange on the same platform as the organizers on their private channel. But then we have something public for everybody. So again, this is recorded, so you'll be able to just go and find it again and join us. So we'll see you on the Slack side. All right, one piece. If you are interested on speaking to an event, Ottawa or Montreal, there's a call for speakers with a form you can fill on PaperCal. So feel free. Again, like the format, like 35 minutes-ish. If you're a cloud practitioner, if you're an SRE, if you do DevOps, anything you do that ends up leveraging GCP, you want to talk about it, share user stories, war stories, nightmare stories that end up well, feel free to submit, and we'll be super happy to have you on our event. So a few meetup announcements. There is an event coming on the 11th for the GDG Cloud Sherbrooke chapter. So there are a few more chapters in the Quebec province. So there's Montreal, there's Quebec City, and there's Sherbrooke. Kind of a good segue on what we're doing today. This one is basically tackling the professional cloud architect certification. So if that's something that's interesting for you, feel free to join the GDG chapter for Sherbrooke and attend the event. While we're on the event side, and that was on the 11th, so that's on the 12th. So there's an extended I/O for GDG Montreal. So this is for the Google I/O event that happens. So if that's something that could be of interest, like, be aware that this is out there. So just follow the shortened URL, and there's going to be 2 days of busy stuff. So the 11th, Sherbrooke, 12th, Google I/O extended. A bit of news. Trying to keep everything on track. Well, there's still our upcoming Google Next, probably going to be in hybrid mode, and there is a series of events coming. 2 have already passed, like the Data Cloud Summit on May 26th and Financial Service Summit. There's the Apply ML Summit, which is perfect for what's happening here on the 10th. So basically now you have 3 days where you have the 10th, the Apply Summit, you have the 11th, you have Sherbrooke, and then the 12th, you have the I/O extended. So you have 3 days of Google stuff coming. And then there's other events like the Security Summit on July 20th. So you shouldn't just go on the URL. It's basically everything is on Cloud on Air, and then you can register from there. And I'm going to segue on Cloud on Air quickly on like what it is actually. So it's a bunch of webinars. There's on-demand webinars, so everything like the Data Summit, which announced a bunch of stuff that was super interesting, is just for you to go and click and listen. So you can just go and pace through it. There's the Summit series, which is basically where you go live and you're also able to ask questions, so which is really good. You also have the Cloud on Board piece, where basically you sign in for free training where it's instructor-led, so you can also ask questions, but you're not alone, which is really cool. There's the tracks for certification prep and Google Cloud Solution, which is basically kind of a big dashboard. Say, hey, if I want to create infrastructure for X type of environment, like what would the architecture look like on GCP? And then you have like blueprints and reference, and you can start with that. So it's a good place for resources. So all in all, if you want to get your fix on all of this, that's the best place to go. Quickly going with the blog post. So a few cool things that I found lately, so I wanted to share. One of them is basically what happened where basically I kill a database or an instance. Is there a way to get it back, even though you can back it up? This blog post actually covers that. Like, there's a nifty little trick where you're able to recreate an instance with the same name, and then you kind of can get it back from Google before it's officially deleted and gone forever. So good little thing where you just went a bit crazy on the delete, and then said, oops, not that database, and too late. So have a look. It's a good little post that was out there. Another one, while we're on the database side, if anybody's, I know this is like more ML focused, but on database side, like if you're trying to migrate, let's say, hundreds of database from on-prem to GCP, if it's just lift and shift or like move and improve, this is basically a user story on Medium, and that covers exactly that. Like the way they went, let's ditch RabbitMQ for PubSub and PostgreSQL. Let's go with Cloud SQL, Postgres, but the rest, like Kafka and Elasticsearch, are basically VMs. So how do we plan? How do they go about this huge process? So it's a really good story. So if you want to have a look, it's worth the read. It's a big article, but it's really in detail per type of database, so super interesting. So another one, which was also interesting for me, was the one where if you have a bucket, you want to expose it, you want to limit the IPs that can actually reach that bucket. That is something that's coming as a bucket policy in the future, but it's still not GA. So if you actually want to do it right now, that tackles this like this issue. It's like, if I want to do this, how do I do it? Basically, it's VPC service control with perimeter bridge. And that way you can actually like block those. For those who are familiar with the series, CSI Cyber, mysterious IPs, where we have a 6.16.255.300, which is super known as an IP range. That you can block. So on the security side, it's really interesting read. So it's a good solutioning around like how do I actually block those things while I wait for that feature. So it's pretty good. Moving along, and just like going into security, there's a like best practices or the best way to authenticate, like if you're driving like service accounts, or if you're a user that want to authenticate to the platform. There are 2 great articles covering this. And thumbs up if you actually get the low ground, high ground meme. So it means that you're a good Star Wars fan, and I appreciate that. Uda is laughing, so I'm good. Thank you. Because again, security is super important when it comes to cloud and leverage, like the way you handle service accounts and the way you handle user authentication are key to your success in leveraging a cloud platform. So going on the GKE side of things, going from security to more like operation. If you're new to GKE, or you're actually like want to see what you can do in terms of operation with GKE, there's a good blog post on basically that covers like the dashboarding of GKE itself in terms of operation through cloud monitoring. So everything that's set up, all the metrics you can get, and everything you can define. So that's a good post there. If you're just kind of tiptoeing your way to GKE and then you're kind of not sure, this is a great way to see, yeah, I can actually see what's going on. And the other one, kind of segueing also back from security before, there's the, if you do Kubernetes and secret, it's like, how can I leverage secret manager to inject secrets in GKE? You have your secrets in GKE, in Kubernetes, which is like the classic secret. But you can actually want to leverage the secret manager from GCP, so manage secret. There's a way of doing that, injecting config by being able to decode the secret from secret manager and feed it inside the cluster. So it's a good little post on that also. Again, security is key, and secret manager, regardless of what you're doing, is also of the highest importance. So good little read. If I'm not mistaken, that's my last one, so I'm kind of on time, which is kind of a first. Wrap it up on the operation of the SRE type of things. If you actually want to go the SRE track and see, well, what's SRE all about, and how can I set up my organization to be like more SRE centric? 2 great blog posts that are kind of recent around the way to get started with SRE, like your basic foundation piece, and also a more detailed one again on fundamentals, but for everything that's SLI, SLA, SLO, which are your indicators, your agreement and objective in terms of service level, that you can like, how do we define this and what's actually possible, and best practices coming straight from Google. So feel free to have a look. 2 great reads, and actually I lied. There's one more. So I wasn't sure. So this one quickly, just I want to keep on time. Basically, it's around talking about operation. This is around budget. So basically, before, like, budget alerts were like, hey, I have $40 a month for my entire organization. Don't know how we're gonna make it, but anyway, this actually now those new feature with the API, you're able to set up like quarterly or yearly options in terms of budget. So you have more flexibility on the way you can send things up. So maybe for project X, your quarterly budget is higher. You can just tweak that up for straight by API. So again, good, super good read that will keep you from sleeping. Definitely. So, am I done? Yes. So on this, I'm gonna pass it to Uda, who just disappeared. Hopefully she's back, so that she can do a whole intro. So.
Oh, I'm actually here. Sorry, okay. My camera just crashed. But so, without further ado, I think we can pass it to Carlos. He's a senior data scientist at Sears. He is Google Cloud MSP partner, Google developer expert in machine learning. So, I'm not going to read this slide. Carlos is an amazing person who has a lot to share. He's been very helpful in general, to me in particular, so I appreciate. But he's an amazing person, and I encourage you to listen very, very carefully to what he has to say. Please, Carlos, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. So let me start sharing my screen. Let's go over to business. Okay. Can you see my screen now? Roll this out. Awesome. All right. So for today, we should be talking about my experience on the machine learning engineer professional certificate. I did that last year. It was still in a beta version. I was one of the first to take that. So let's say I think I took that by mid-August. I waited like for my results in a month or so. Then by October, I was surprised that I was approved. Kind of the whole surprise exactly because I think this is the latest certificate that was released by Google Cloud, which was exactly by that period in 2020. And this is a very kind of desired certification as well at the same time. I see many people, they were expecting from Google a certification where you could go more into the machine learning thing, into deep learning, machine learning, and more into TensorFlow, instead of only kind of getting familiarized and learning how to operate and how to build solutions using GCP itself, right, as we have for data engineer and for cloud architect. So this is definitely one certificate that a data scientist or a machine learning engineer would be targeting taking as one step of career progression, right? So we will be talking about exactly this certification. The agenda for today, we will briefly mention some benefits. Obviously, there are multiple reasons why you're taking a certificate, but there are kind of the common ones that we should mention. Next, we go over and discuss about the exam itself, see kind of what are the how you'll be assessed, what topics you should study, and then we will be exploring some of the resources. We go with simple questions, and next we will kind of present the current machine learning engineer certification challenge. That it's a campaign that's running right now, in which you can get kind of subsidy from Google to take the certificate with these certain kind of timelines during this year 2021. All right. I gently ask you to drop down some of the questions you may have. I'm driving this conversation using this slide first, exactly to hit kind of the basic information that if you have never heard about this certification in the past, and then we can go over into more the specific questions. All right. So my plan is to go quick in here. We don't need to spend too much time, and then instead we spend way more time on the questions that the audience may have. All right. Few benefits for this certification. We have there are some good history with the cloud architect certificate. Well designed in the market, exactly because the key is to cover several kind of open source technologies, and the data engineer as well. Everything that you learn meanwhile you're preparing will make it you're ready to also work with open source technologies, right? So you have those two side benefits. People are seeing that the market is very kind of hot. That's normal, and people are definitely looking for people with certifications as well. The side point is exactly the cost of those certifications, right? As you can imagine, the average price for those certifications is about $200 US in US, not Canadian dollars. So they are kind of expensive, although you can try to hit your certification and book your exam by leveraging some of the benefits of those marketing campaigns, for example, that's running right now. Or also you can have kind of a subsidy from your company, depending on if it's also the company's benefit as well. But definitely, it's a good thing. I wouldn't say that if you are in a starting level position, in a beginning level as a data scientist, and if you are starting your career as a data scientist, or even if you are too much experienced, I don't believe this will be a certification that will change your career, that will give a shift in a positive direction in your career. But it definitely helps, right? It's all about depending on which kind of organizations you are working on. Myself, I work as a consultant, so for me it's important to have those certificates and to always stay tuned with updates on those technologies. So it's kind of important for me, right, in the role that I'm assuming right now. Yeah, kind of, and then as soon as you approved, you will get your badge that you can include into your LinkedIn network, and also you can be selected to present in events. Because of that, you can also have benefits. In the past, we had when we had Cloud Next, Google Next events, you may have some discounts for those professionals with certificates. Now, there are all the benefits coming along, like a swag, that is a jacket. There are many things that you can claim on. Okay, this is the plethora of certifications that we have right now. About 10 certifications, or nine in here. That is the associate, which is the very initial level. So usually it's funny because if you are in starting position, the easiest for you obviously will be the associate cloud engineer, which cover the basis of Google Cloud and also of these open source technologies. And it's very common to see many people taking those two certificates, the cloud architect and the data engineer, which gives a good breadth and perspective of all Google Cloud technologies and offerings. And then you see specific professionals going into the security engineer certificate, or people dedicated with the network going into the network engineer. Many people working with DevOps go with the DevOps engineer and the cloud developer. And there are some folks working with Google Workspace and so on, that they can go with the collaboration engineer as well. Okay, but definitely out of all those in here, the two most famous, cloud architect and data engineer. Yeah, and definitely in the data world, in the ML data world, ML engineer, the certification that we are talking about today, it's in high. There are also people are saying, okay, so what would be my trajectory in here, right? So if you're already experienced, you can straightforward and take your machine learning engineer certificate. Although if you're in the starting level, you may decide to start first with the associate. This will be an easy gap. This is also cheaper. And then you can, if you want to be a person to be working on the data and ML side, take the data engineer before taking the machine learning engineer, because that will help a lot. This will also give you a good perspective on the Google Cloud technologies that you have to work with data. So, it's kind of the normal progression. As you were training a model, you need to prepare the data, and then you go into building and training the model. For a certification metaphor, you take your data engineer and then you go for your machine learning engineer as well. Okay, unless you feel like you are too much experienced already in Google Cloud, have been working that for at least 1 year, you can go straight away and book your machine learning engineer. But it's not that easy. It's not that simple. People are saying like 6 months at minimum. Yeah. And for the professional, people are saying 3 years. I think that's too much. I would say like 1 year. 1 year industry experience associated with cloud expertise as well. Working, obviously, using those technologies, right? Not using kind of VMs to run training or inference, right? But really using those services out there. That really makes a huge difference. So let's talk about the exam. Kind of what exactly is this exam, right? So this professional, right? This person. They are responsible for designing, building, and productionalizing ML models to solve business challenges using Google Cloud technologies and knowledge of proven ML model and techniques. Okay, so it's all about ML and involving Google Cloud. So you can always easily associate that with TensorFlow, right? And that's in effect, you have tons of TensorFlow questions in this exam. Okay, and then this will cover the whole life cycle, in the whole workflow on implementing architectures and understanding the kind of architectures we are working on, convolution layers, recurrent layers, why we should use either data pipeline, preparing the data, and deploying the model for inference. All those things should be considered as skills for this exam. So as you can imagine, framing problem as well, architecturing those ML solutions, preparing the data in process, and then you also have some automation piece for the ML pipeline, monitoring and maintaining those solutions, and building those ML models, right? Using some tools like AutoML, which is a tool that makes it possible to do narrow architecture search, which is one option of transfer learning, in which you don't need to worry with the model architecture itself. You just need to provide the data with the proper labels, and then the Google brings this technology that we're trying to use some building blocks to provide you, to give you as an output a trained model with a decent performance for your specific data set. Okay. The exam has some natural details about the exam, 2 hours length. For this exam, we have 60 questions. This is also something new. The other exams, we have about 40 or 50 questions. Depend on if you have extra questions that you are assessed as part of the pool, as part of future questions that the exam may include. The exam format is all multiple choice and multiple select. It's only those 2 options. So be aware that every time you're looking at a question, see how many answers you are possible to choose in there. You can skip, okay? Those questions, you don't need to follow them in exactly that specific order. You can skip and revisit, also mark to review. As a prerequisite, to do the exam itself, none, kind of English, to know English or know the language in which the exam is available. I think the exam is available in English right now. I don't think it's available in Spanish or anything, but they are working hard to become available to other languages. Like Cloud Architect, I know that it's available in Spanish and Portuguese, for example. There are some exams also available in Korean. So yeah, you have to check the language available for you. So pretty much you need to have a domain on the language. Recommended experience, this is kind of an average, not very specific. It also depends on how familiarized and how exposed you get to those technologies. Exam delivery now, this is something important to mention because of the COVID situation we are living all together. The natural option that you have to take the exam is to have a online proctored exam remotely, so you will be doing from home. I can be doing exactly from this table and chair, proctored by someone from those companies that are able to provide us access to the exam. Okay, so this person will be watching along our exam process. Meanwhile, we answered those questions. I have never taken this approach. Last year, it was I was able to go to a place to take the exam, but you have to see if the place is open or not. But definitely consider the on-site proctor exam as your first option at this point in time. But you have test centers spread out. You know, here in Ottawa we have 2 or 3. You have many in Montreal. Pretty much in every large city in the world, you have one testing center for you to take. So what would be the preparation path? So first thing for you, join those challenges. Okay, you have a link in here to follow these. We did that. You will also have access to the preparation material. Some of the preparation material they are paid. Okay, for example, the quick labs that you can experiment. Okay, you have recorded classes that you can consume on demand, and also some labs, self-tutored labs that you can follow. Those are to be you have to pay for them, but if you join the challenge, you won't need to pay for them. You will have credits to use. All right. There is also this link that I leave for you, this spreadsheet. This is supposed to be access public. So here you have all the, in order, what are all the steps that you should follow. First, you should take this Coursera course, available in English and Japanese. And then you can also take some classes, instructor-led classes. And then you have a few quick lab paths to go, whether you have several topics to cover. The whole idea is that you will be covering those topics that are important for the certification, but they don't suffice itself, okay? Another recommendation that I leave for you is exactly to always use the certification exam guide to understand which topics you need to cover, okay? So for example, when we open the guide, if my internet runs smoothly, yes. So we can see that there is a whole description of all the topics being covered by inside each section, okay? So have that in a spreadsheet and start adding some notes in whether how knowledgeable you feel when you look at those subtopics, okay? So for example, when we talk about this 1.4, identifying risk to feasibility of MS solutions, considerations include, and then we have in here, aligning with Google responsible AI practices. This is something that there should be a document for you or something to read, right? Provided by Google. So if you come in here, you can Google it easily, and then you have responsible AI practices, okay? So you will go and have a look at that, read all the documentation, and then you start taking some notes, okay, doing summary of your learning experience, and you start filling the gaps of your learning, right? One thing that I noticed was that it's hard to feel comfortable understanding all those subtopics, obviously. But eventually, you will be surprised in the exam by facing a question in which you will not feel familiarized to answer that, and that should be okay. The point is not on acing the exam, knowing all the answers for all the questions, but at least knowing the answer for the majority of them, right? That's when you should stop pretty much doing your preparation, is when you feel comfortable after you're doing the samples, after checking the guide, you feel like you know already most of the contents, okay, that you have in there. To help you on the path, so these This spreadsheet we also have available as a learning path. You can see in the link that I'm giving to you into this presentation. I will leave this presentation available as well for you to use that as a reference. We have a learning path now in which we have everything you have described, everything you should do to ace the exam, including all the quick labs that you should take, all the laboratories you should take, all the courses you may take, okay? So you need to follow that. This is one thing that was the major complaint for this certification. I myself, I didn't have all those learning paths ready for me. It was all about trying to find and filling the gaps that I was identifying when I was looking at the exam guide. So it was super hard to get ready for the certification, but now you have a learning path that empowers you on doing that. The challenge for this certification is exactly because it covered 3 pieces, okay? It doesn't cover code at all. You don't need to know how to code on TensorFlow, for example, or scikit-learn, but you really need to know the concepts. You really need to be good at all the deep learning and machine learning concepts. This is like 30% of the exam. The other 30% of the exam is exactly about the Google Cloud technologies, all the offerings on AI and data. So you need to be familiarized with the data flow, with BigQuery. You need to be familiarized with the AI platform, which is now called Vertex AI. So expecting the exam, for example, something that will mention Vertex AI or a feature that is only available in Vertex AI, including continuous evaluation, for example, right? When I took my exam, they asked me some questions of future features that were not available on AI platform, but they are now available on Vertex AI. Okay, so use Vertex AI. All the features of Vertex AI is also something that you need to know to ace and also to fill the gaps into the exam guide. Okay, you need to really understand all the Google Cloud AI solutions available in there. Be super familiarized with that. You need to be familiarized with Kubeflow pipelines as well, since we have now the Vertex AI pipelines, which runs on top of Kubeflow pipelines. You need to be familiarized with TPUs, with GPUs. Okay, that's super important. That's the basics, you know. And then you may ask, oh, how much percentage from the data engineer this exam I can benefit of? I would say about, I think about 40% of the material that you find on the data engineer exam may help you on the preparation for this certification. But there is a reminder of 60%, which is exactly the extra emphasis that exams takes into the Google Cloud AI solutions, take into TensorFlow, take into Kubeflow pipelines, okay? So as I was saying before, 3 pieces. First piece, 30%, corresponds to ML concepts, all that ML concepts that you can imagine, like a bias, skewing, and overfitting, underfitting, those metrics for regression, metrics for classification. Consider all that, all right? Then you have 30% that goes over the Google Cloud technology itself, and then 30, which is the Google Cloud AI, and then the remaining 30% is exactly this huge emphasis on TensorFlow and Kubeflow pipelines. And when I'm saying TensorFlow, they go into details, for example, asking things about TFX, which is TensorFlow Enterprise, which is a library that we can use to build enterprise-level pipelines. They ask about TF Data, Dataset API, which is a library in which it's high performance to provide data, to feed data to any sort of model and data in any sort of format. It can be data in an image format, in textual format, in tabular format. So you need really to understand those things, okay? Really be familiar with TensorFlow. I even got, I can remember that I even was asked about TensorFlow Profiler, which was something still in alpha, still in a beta version, but I had questions from TensorFlow Profiler asking me what kind of features TensorFlow Profiler provide me, how can I use TensorFlow Profiler. So also be aware that there is, when we talk about machine learning and deep learning, there is obviously the preparation piece, there is the training piece where you build the model, there is the inference piece as well, but it's also important to have in mind that there is the optimization portion, including quantization, including mixed precision, including working with GPUs and TPUs using accelerated hardware, including deploying those things into in a TensorFlow JS or even into TensorFlow Lite, which will run on devices, and how you can optimize those things. Okay, very important. To help you with that, I leave you with 2 links. One is definitely the Coursera preparation course. This is important. I think this will cover pretty much around 70% of the whole material. For the certifications, there are extra things that are not covered in here, obviously, and then you will have to find your way through using the guide to help you, obviously. But very important as well, check all those kind of testimonials. All right. You see my testimonial in there as well, dated as of August 2020, which was just after I took the exam. So I had my memory fresh with the kind of questions I had in there. You can see Dimitri's as well. I used Dimitri's to study, to prepare for mine. But other people have been also writing those testimonials on their experience. Every time you see like a certification in 8 days, obviously this person must be someone that's already kind of familiarized. I took myself about 3 weeks or a month to prepare. And that's more or less the kind of the timeline that I see people taking. Experienced one take 1 month. Not many very experienced, they take about 2 months to 3 months. Mostly now with the online learning, it's kind of hard. We have so many concurrent demands, so it's kind of hard to conciliate to have more time available to get ready for the certifications. Yeah, there is also another link for you. This is a GitHub link, so it's also as a reference for you. Check those testimonials, because then you will have a fresh perspective of what questions you may find in there, what things you may emphasize during your study. Very important. This definitely helped me a lot when I was preparing myself. Let's go over the next piece, which is the sample questions. I want now to bring you some insights on how we can answer those questions. Okay, there are no kind of tricky questions. That's one thing for sure. There are no kind of tricky things that you may have to consider. I think the main key is to understand what those things mean, right? Every time you read kind of what you are being questioned about, you have to understand, you have to find your regions of attention in the question that you have, and also trying to understand what this person is trying to mean with this question. So for example, we have this question 1 in here. You need to write a generic task to verify whether DNN models automatically released by your team have a sufficient number of parameters to learn the task for which they were built. What should you do? One keyword in here is task. He's saying generic task, and that reminds me of unit tasks, right? So start thinking, oh, how can I unit task my DNN model? And then it says a DNN model, right? It can be anything. Something simple, something complex. Assume also the simple models, okay? And then it says that it is automatically, so probably there should be automatically released. So probably should be part of a CI/CD pipeline. And the things that the objective here is to find sufficient number of parameters, right? See if the model learns. That's the thing. This is more like a experience-based question. You will have, and to answer those questions, first thing, go over on hashing the answers that doesn't make any sense. Right? So for example, train the model for a few iterations and check for NaN values. This is something that may make sense, kind of to train for few iterations. Mostly for automatically release, you cannot train for hours, right? And then this one says train a simple linear model and determine if the NaN model outperforms it. This is not exactly what he wants. He wants to unit test the DNN model. You don't need to unit test a simple linear model. Okay, so this is out of question. We don't need to compare anything in here. When we talk about the last one, train the model with no regularization on one batch of data and verify that the loss function is close to 0. This is definitely something very interesting for us. Okay, this makes sense. So pretty much this one makes sense. The loss is constant means there is no learning, so this doesn't make sense. So B and C doesn't make any sense. So it would be in between A and D. But checking for NaN values actually shows that there is something wrong with the model, right? It's not that there is something right. It doesn't mean that it's learning at all. So you can exclude that when it says check for NaN values. So your answer would be the D. Okay. You can do kind of similar approach as well for this question 2. It wants it gives you a context. Sometimes those questions, they need to give you a context for you to answer. So they say like, you search for a retailer, you want to use ML to forecast future sales, leveraging 10 years of historic sales data. Historical data is stored on cloud storage in Avro format. These may be something interesting for us to keep in mind. Also, we understand that forecast future sales is something to keep in mind. You want to rapidly experiment. That's super key. Rapidly experiment with all the available data. How should you build and train your model for sales forecast? For rapid experimentation, you can exclude everything that gives us too much effort, too much work. So notebook work, not at all. And AI platform training with a model, not at all, because this won't be fast. This will take tons of time. We are talking about 10 years of data, right? So 2 ways to do that, exactly by leveraging BigQuery ML or AutoML tables. However, the point in here is that if you want to do forecasting, it makes more sense for us to use a RIMA model for time series forecasting. This is probably a time series forecasting, since we have kind of 10 years of historical data. Makes more sense to use a RIMA than using regression model, and that's why the right answer is a RIMA. So this is more or less the way you answer those questions, okay? I leave other questions for you in here as well. And with that, there is also this link that I ask you to follow. This is the current challenge. We have the challenge that recently closed on March 31st, but there is a new challenge coming along. And then you can register for it, okay? And now I hand over to the Ask Me Anything session of the talk. Do we have any questions that we want to cover in here?
Okay, so I think Lele has a first question for you. Thank you, Carlos, for all this info. So Lele is asking what's the difference between this certificate and the TensorFlow certificate, the one that is included in the GCP skills.
Yeah. So the TensorFlow certificate, it focuses more on the coding itself. So you need to code TensorFlow. So imagine that that TensorFlow certificate would be more a question of you working with your preferred IDE, okay? And you will be coding TensorFlow. You will be solving for You'll be implementing a vision model, a image classifier model using TensorFlow. You'll be implementing a autoencoder, if I'm not wrong. You'll be implementing a text model, text classification model, and you have to code that. Okay, they will give you kind of few kind of lab challenges for you to solve, and then you will solve that and publish the code that you have and your results for them to assess later on. So that's the whole difference. The TensorFlow certificate will assess you on your capability to build code using TensorFlow, whereas this certificate is more from try to assess more your familiarity on using GCP. So that certificate doesn't cover anything related to GCP. These will cover GCP entirely, and more. And you don't need to code anything. You don't need to be familiarized with code. You don't need to understand how those architectures are composed or are built. It's more a question of knowing exactly what kind of models or what kind of approach inside GCP using TensorFlow you can use to solve specific problems. So it's more like a problem-oriented questions every time you have questions about TensorFlow.
All right. Any other questions for Carlos? You can ask very personal, if you think it's just you in that situation, it's probably not just you. So feel free to ask all your questions here.
I know that Carolina, who is here, she mentioned that she wants to ask me stuff. Carolina, that's your time.
Well, in the meantime, I have more of a practical question for you. So how long so I guess this certification expires, right?
Yes, it expires after 2 years, I guess. Yep.
Okay. But it's only, so you only started it, but I mean, you passed it when it just came out. So I guess there's no batch that already took it the second time, because I was wondering how different.
No. Yeah, I can answer that. That's a good question. Those certifications, they are evolving, right? So that's why it's important to check those testimonials for you to understand what's exactly the kind of questions I have right now. The batch of questions that I have, they are different from those ones that we see in the sample questions, for example. I think I didn't have that question on the unit test, on testing the DNN, but I had that one or something very close to that was asking about BQML. And with the time, those questions, they change, right? That is also another problem. Kind of people think, they look at the sample questions and they think, I think I'm familiarized with those questions. I will take the exam. I won't need too much of a preparation. I only missed out of 20 sample questions. I only missed one. So yeah, it should be good. I would take that. Don't do that, because those questions, they are not up to date. Okay, they are they will be there like forever. Try to get more a fresh perspective and also review the learning path. If you follow the learning path, you will get too much insights on the kind of questions. That's for sure.
Okay, so these are just really given directions on the kind of questions, like the kind of logic behind the questions would be there, but it's not updated. I think we have another question from Sebastian. Or Sebastian.
What kind of skills are required to achieve successfully this exam? I'm new in this whole ML environment. It's more to know what kind of models and tools you can use to perform ML tasks. That's the thing. If you were taking that TensorFlow certificate, right? I would say, okay, go study you can practice on Kaggle. I would say go with Kaggle because you will learn a lot. focus on TensorFlow implementations, go with Cargo, you will feel super familiarized. Also check the tutorials on the TensorFlow website. That should suffice. Actually, for this one, it's not exactly like this. You have to really be practicing on AI platform. And to help you with that, you will need to practice with Quick Labs. Okay? Since you mentioned that you are new to ML, accept that challenge. The previous challenge ended on March 31st. Go to with the next challenge with the new campaign that you have right now, because you have access to credits to practice on Quick Labs. Go over those Quick Labs, because that will give you out of the inertia of not being familiarized, right? I definitely feel like GCP may not be the best cloud to start working as an ML enthusiast. But using those Quick Labs, you will break definitely that inertia, right? You will be starting going over in there. There are also some tutorials in the documentation, okay? If you go over that Google Cloud AI, you will find all the solutions in there, all the services documentation. You will also have some blueprints, some reference architectures. Read those stuff, okay? Read those reference architectures. Understand how people are building solutions with Google Cloud. Those materials are super rich, super rich. Even during my certification, I remember I spent 1 day only checking those blog posts from TensorFlow, from Google Cloud, checking those reference architectures as well, publishing there, because I knew that some material, some experience would be extracted from there to build those questions. And that's exactly what happens. They always need to get it from somewhere, because exactly they can confront people in the future. Like, look, we have those contents written, digest those contents, because they will help you with the certification path.
Okay, I think we have, Darshan has had a question about the hands-on ML and TensorFlow books, but I guess you really answered the difference between the GCP and the TensorFlow.
Yeah,
Darshan,
the
if it's not,
the other certification will be better using the Aurélien Héron book.
Right. So everyone, for the links and the content, they will be available along with the recording of this session as well. So don't worry, you'll have everything updated. And to be mindful of everyone's time, I think we can start closing the session now. Carolina had her question at the end. But
there you go. Carolina, take the data engineer first. I think it will be helpful. Then you go over ML engineer. However, I feel like you are working already with GCP. Yeah, you can take ML engineer straight away. I think it will be more realistic for you.
Okay, so everyone, I think we're a little bit, we finished a little bit later, so we are gonna let you go back to all your activities. But before you go, we'll be super, super happy if you could fill the survey for us. It's really in order to help us make content that's gonna be tailored for you. Let us know what you think about this session, what you wanna listen and hear about in our future sessions as well. You have a link and a QR code because we're super cool. I don't know who has QR code readers in their phone, but both of them should lead you to the same survey.
Excellent. Well, on this we'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for attending. We're gonna be planning our Q3 or maybe like a Q2, another shot depending on what we get from feedback. So super happy to have everybody join. Thanks Carlos for the great talk. Thanks everybody for attending, and the recording I'll stop the recording, and it's gonna end up being available on YouTube while everything gets transcoded and posted. So just keep an eye out. It's going to be available soon. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.